Darius Jackson's morning had begun with a simple routine. He'd taken the same route through Chicago O'Hare for years, a comforting, if mundane, part of his daily life. Today, however, everything changed the moment he stepped off the plane. Darius, a determined black man with a calm demeanor and eyes that held the weight of unspoken histories, was hurrying to catch a connecting flight. The airport bustled with travelers from every corner of the globe, yet the atmosphere was unusually tense that day. A chill that wasn't entirely due to the air conditioning swept through the terminal as Darius navigated past busy check-in counters and security lines. He had always prided himself on his composure, especially when faced with adversity. But nothing had prepared him for what was about to unfold. As Darius reached the security checkpoint, he was pulled aside by a uniformed officer whose eyes burned with disdain. Officer Paul Whitaker, a man whose very presence reeked of entitlement and prejudice, stepped forward without invitation. "Sir, we need to take a closer look at you," Whitaker barked, his tone dismissive yet laced with a malice that set Darius's nerves on edge. Darius tried to remain calm. "Of course, officer. What seems to be the issue?" he asked politely, his voice steady despite the rising anxiety in his chest. Whitaker sneered. "Just routine," he said curtly, though his eyes told a different story. As Darius removed his shoes and placed his bag on the conveyor belt, Whitaker's scrutiny grew. He pored over Darius's belongings with a meticulous, almost predatory intensity, as if looking for something, anything, to justify his hostility. The seconds stretched into an eternity as fellow travelers watched in silence. A smartphone's camera began recording discreetly, capturing every moment. Unbeknownst to Darius, the scene was unfolding into a viral moment that would soon send shockwaves through the nation. Whitaker, with deliberate cruelty, planted a small object in Darius's bag, a contraband that Darius knew he had never possessed. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up the object for all to see. The accusation was baseless, yet the damage was done. Darius's protest was calm, yet tinged with disbelief. "Officer, I've never seen that before. This must be a mistake." But Whitaker was beyond reason. With a swift motion, he cuffed Darius and, in front of the growing crowd, forcefully escorted him away. The scene, captured on countless mobile devices, would soon be flooding social media. The injustice was raw, and the air was electric with outrage. Outside the checkpoint, Darius was thrown into the back of an unmarked police van. His heart pounded as the doors slammed shut behind him. In that moment, he realized that what had started as a routine stop had transformed into an assault on his dignity. A racist cop had set his sights on him without cause. Inside the van, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Darius's mind raced as he recalled every instance of subtle bias he had experienced over the years, never imagining that it would culminate in such an overt act of racism. Outside, the world continued unaware, but inside, a storm was brewing, a storm that would propel Darius into a battle not only for his own freedom, but for justice on behalf of everyone who had ever been wronged. In the following hours, as news of the incident spread like wildfire, Darius's life was irrevocably changed. His video, raw, unedited, and damning, went viral. Public figures, activists, and outraged citizens demanded accountability. Social media exploded with hashtags, and soon a prominent Georgia senator tweeted, "Looking into this. DOJ might too." The tweet became a rallying cry for justice. Darius's lawyer, Tanya Brooks, mobilized immediately. With a fierce determination, she gathered evidence, contacted media outlets, and organized protests. The community rallied around him, donations poured in, and his story became a symbol of the struggle against systemic racism. In the midst of this chaos, Darius felt a renewed sense of purpose. Though his career, and indeed his life, had been upended by the encounter with Whitaker, he vowed to fight back. Every step of his journey from that fateful day at the airport became a testament to his resilience. Even as he faced countless obstacles, a smear campaign engineered by those in power, relentless harassment, and personal loss, Darius found strength in the collective outcry of a community that refused to be silenced. In a montage of images that played on every screen from Chicago to Atlanta, Darius's determined gaze and quiet defiance were juxtaposed with the grotesque spectacle of police misconduct. The incident was no longer just his personal tragedy, it had become a clarion call against racial injustice. For Darius, the fight had only just begun. As he prepared for the legal battles ahead, his thoughts turned to his family, his future, and the promise of a society where everyone would be treated with dignity. But with each passing day, the shadow of that moment at the airport loomed larger, a constant reminder of the deep-seated rot within the system. Back at the airport, while some officers tried to cover up the incident by planting false evidence and altering records, the truth was too potent to be silenced. As the investigation unfolded, whispers of corruption and abuse grew louder. The very institutions meant to protect citizens now seemed complicit in perpetuating injustice. Darius's journey from that moment of humiliation to becoming a symbol of defiance was marked by countless trials. In the courtrooms, on the streets, and across digital platforms, his story was dissected, debated, and immortalized. The incident at O'Hare was not an isolated event. It was a microcosm of a broader struggle against the pervasive inequities of a broken system. Through tears, anger, and determination, Darius began to see his own pain as a catalyst for change. His encounter with Whitaker had stripped away the veneer of normalcy, revealing a brutal reality that many had long suspected but few dared to confront. It was a call to arms for those who believe that justice, though elusive, was worth fighting for. In the following days, protests erupted outside police headquarters, community leaders spoke at town halls, and citizens from all walks of life marched for change. Amid the chaos, Darius remained a steadfast figure, a quiet, unyielding force determined to see the system held accountable. His journey was just beginning, and he knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, betrayal, and heartbreak. Yet in that moment of despair, Darius also found hope. His resilience became a beacon, drawing support from unexpected corners. Friends, family, and even strangers reached out, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. The viral video had become more than a record of injustice. It was a symbol of resistance, a testament to the power of truth in a world desperate for change. Not even close. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Name after name, pain after pain, until he reached the last paper. A name he never thought he'd say. Jamal Whitaker. The crowd went still. Darius turned toward the cameras. Paul Whitaker's own brother, beaten to death in the same system he swore to protect. Maxwell stepped forward, holding up the evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the beginning of the end. Arrest warrants have been issued for multiple high-ranking officials, including, he listed the names, a judge, a police commissioner, a senator, a governor. The crowd erupted. Shouts, cheers, rage. The system was finally breaking. Meanwhile, inside a dark room, a phone rang. A shadowy figure answered. He exposed us. A gravelly voice responded, I know. Silence. Fix it. Click. The line went dead. But the war had just begun. The victory didn't last long. Darius barely had time to process the weight of what he'd just done before the storm hit. That night, as he sat at the dinner table with Lena and Jalen, a low hum filled the air. A drone. The tiny machine hovered just outside their window. Jalen gasped, stepping back. Lena's eyes went wide. Darius lunged forward. Too late. The drone exploded. Glass shattered. The blast sent them flying. The fire alarm blared. Smoke curled into the air. Darius groaned, his ears ringing as he struggled to his feet. Lena? Jalen? Coughing. A groan. He turned. Lena was shielding Jalen with her body. We're okay, she gasped. But outside they weren't. Tires screeched. Men in tactical gear flooded the street. Shouts filled the air. Go! Go! Get the target! Darius grabbed Jalen, hauling him toward the back door. Gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into the walls, tearing through furniture. Lena screamed. Darius shoved them into the back alley, heart pounding. They ran. Down the alley. Across the street. Into the unknown. Meanwhile, inside an unmarked van, a phone buzzed. A voice crackled through the speaker. You let them escape? A man in the van, face obscured by shadows, clenched his jaw. It won't happen again. Make sure it doesn't. The line went dead. The man exhaled, watching the flames rise in the distance. This wasn't over. You don't give the orders here, Jackson. Darius took another step forward. If you hurt him, I swear to God. Whitaker laughed. Or what? You'll shoot me? Darius's jaw tightened. He could take the shot, but Jalen was too close. One wrong move. Whitaker knew it. He was playing the game. Darius needed another way. Lena stepped out of the car. Gun raised. A silent signal passed between her and Darius. They had one chance. Lena moved first. Bang. She fired. The bullet hit the man holding Jalen in the leg. He screamed, dropping Jalen. Darius lunged, pulled Jalen into his arms. Whitaker roared, raising his gun. Darius turned, shielding his son. Bang. Lena fired again. Whitaker stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped through his shirt. Darius pushed Jalen toward Lena. Get him in the car. Lena nodded, pulling Jalen away. Whitaker gasped, staggering. Darius leveled his gun. This is over. Whitaker snarled, hate burning in his eyes. You think you've won? Darius exhaled. I know I have. He pulled the trigger. A single shot. Whitaker crumpled. Lena called from the car. We have to go. Sirens wailed in the distance. Darius turned, running for the car. Jalen was safe. The nightmare was over. But as he looked back at Whitaker's lifeless body, he knew. This was just the beginning. The sirens grew louder, their wails slicing through the night air. Darius clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Lena sat beside him, cradling Jalen, who clung to her, his face buried in her shoulder. You did it, she murmured, looking at Darius. But his jaw remained tight. We're not safe yet. They sped through the dimly lit streets, leaving the industrial zone behind. Every turn, every shadow felt like another threat. Jalen sniffled, lifting his head. Dad? Darius softened, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. I'm right here, buddy. Jalen's lower lip trembled. Are they gone? Darius swallowed the lump in his throat. Yeah, they're gone. Lena reached for his hand. Then we go home. Darius exhaled. Home. It felt like a foreign word. But first, he had to finish this. An hour later, the police department. The precinct buzzed with chaos. Detectives, officers, reporters, everyone talked in hushed, frantic tones. Darius and Lena stepped inside, Jalen tucked protectively between them. Agent Maxwell was already waiting. His sharp eyes scanned Darius before he nodded. You're lucky to be alive. Darius folded his arms. Luck had nothing to do with it. Maxwell motioned toward a private room. Come on, we need to talk. Inside the briefing room, the walls were lined with case files, stacks of evidence, photos of Whitaker. Darius felt his stomach churn. How deep was it, he asked. Maxwell sighed, rubbing his temples. Deeper than we thought. Whitaker was just one piece. He was protecting someone higher up. Lena stiffened. Darius narrowed his eyes. Who? Maxwell hesitated. Then he slid a folder across the table. Darius flipped it open. His breath hitched. It wasn't just one name. It was several. Judges, politicians, police commissioners. Lena let out a sharp breath. They were all in on it? Maxwell nodded grimly. They ran a network, cover-ups, bribes, framing innocent people. Whitaker was their muscle. Darius clenched his fists. This isn't over. Maxwell leaned forward. No, but now we have the upper hand. He tapped the folder. We take this public and they'll fall. Darius exhaled, his pulse steadying. This wasn't just about him anymore. It never had been. This was about justice. Jalen's small hand slipped into his. Darius looked down, his son's tired eyes full of trust. He had to finish this. For Jalen. For every person Whitaker had wronged. Darius lifted his chin. Let's burn them down. The press conference was set. Darius stood at the steps of the federal courthouse, Lena by his side. Jalen held his mother's hand, shifting nervously. The crowd was massive. Reporters, activists, families of Whitaker's past victims. They were all waiting for the truth. Darius took a deep breath as Agent Maxwell stepped up to the podium first. Maxwell cleared his throat. "This is bigger than we ever imagined," he began. "For years, a network of corruption has been operating right under our noses, protected by power, fueled by fear." The cameras flashed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Maxwell continued. One man stood at the center of it all, Paul Whitaker. But he wasn't working alone. He turned, gesturing to Darius. "And thanks to the bravery of this man, we now have proof." Darius stepped forward, his chest tight. The mic crackled as he spoke. "My name is Darius Jackson." Silence. He scanned the faces before him. Some hopeful, some skeptical. "I was profiled, harassed, framed." His voice hardened. "And I am not the first." Gasps. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Say their names." Darius pulled out a stack of papers. He unfolded the first. Michael Reeves, falsely accused, died in custody. A woman in the front row broke into sobs. Darius unfolded another. Tyrone Wallace, shot during a routine stop. More voices rose. And now Darius had the proof. But before he could act on it, Lena grabbed his arm. "There's one more thing," she said, voice shaking. He frowned. "What?" She hesitated. Then, "Hargrove knows about Jalen." Darius's blood went cold. Lena's grip tightened. "He knows where your son is." Darius's mind fractured into 1,000 sharp edges. Hargrove knew where Jalen was. He surged to his feet. "Where is he?" Lena swallowed hard. "At your sister's, right? Hargrove has people watching her place." A fresh wave of nausea hit him. His sister, Maya, Jalen, they were in danger. He yanked his phone from his pocket and dialed. It rang once, twice, no answer. A third time, straight to voicemail. His pulse roared in his ears. Lena grabbed his wrist. "I can help." Darius yanked away. "I don't trust you." "Then trust that I want Hargrove to burn just as much as you do." He didn't have time to argue. Every second counted. Without another word, he bolted for the door. The chase begins. Darius's tires screeched against the pavement as he raced through the streets of Chicago. Lena was in the passenger seat, guiding him to a secure location she claimed could help. A place where he might find answers. But every mile between him and Maya's house felt like a noose tightening around his chest. "They won't hurt Jalen," Lena said, voice hesitant. "Not yet." He shot her a glare. "You sure about that?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because they both knew the truth. Hargrove had sent Whitaker after Darius before, and Whitaker was a man who didn't leave loose ends. The ambush. Darius took a sharp turn onto Maya's street and slammed the brakes. A black SUV sat parked in front of the house, the engine running, lights off, waiting. Darius's breath hitched. Then, Maya's front door exploded open. A man in tactical gear dragged Jalen out. Jalen screaming. Maya fought, clawing at the man's arm. A second man shoved her back inside. The door slammed shut. Darius reacted on instinct. He flung open the car door, gun drawn. "Jalen." The man shoved Jalen into the SUV. Darius sprinted forward. The SUV peeled out. Tires screeched. It was getting away. Darius fired. Bang. A tire burst. The vehicle skidded, losing control. But it kept going. Darius jumped back into the car. Lena was already in the driver's seat. "Drive." She slammed her foot on the gas. The chase was on. A father's fury. The SUV weaved through the city. Darius gripped the dashboard, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. Jalen was in there. His son. His entire world. He'd fought for justice before. But this was war. And he was ready to burn Chicago down to get his son back. The SUV barreled through the streets, weaving recklessly between traffic. Darius clenched his fists as Lena gripped the wheel, keeping close behind them. We can't let them reach the highway, she said, her voice tense. If they do, we lose them. Darius's mind raced. Jalen was in that car. He couldn't afford to lose him. Then, a sharp right, the SUV veered down a side street. A mistake. Darius recognized this part of town, an abandoned industrial area near the river. A dead end. They're trapped. Lena breathed. Darius grabbed his gun. Keep driving. The SUV skidded to a stop, its tires screeching against the pavement. Darius was out before Lena even braked. Gun raised, heart pounding. The driver's side door burst open. A man stepped out. Whitaker. A cruel grin stretched across his face. Didn't think you had the guts to chase me down, Jackson. Darius's hands shook with rage. Where's my son? Whitaker lifted his hands mockingly. Relax. He's fine. Darius took a step closer. Where is he? A second door opened. A man dragged Jalen out, a gun pressed to the boy's temple. Jalen's wide eyes locked onto Darius. Dad. The word sliced through Darius like a knife. His finger twitched on the trigger. Let him go, Whitaker. Whitaker's grin widened. We don't back down, he said, voice like steel. We take the fight to them. Lena nodded. Tanya's voice was firm. Then we better move fast. Because whoever's pulling the strings, they're just getting started. Darius Jackson wasn't just fighting Paul Whitaker. He was fighting something much bigger, something deeper, something older. And now they were making their move. The smear campaign. The morning after the bombshell news report, Darius's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, friends, enemies, everyone wanted a statement. He ignored them all. Instead, he sat with Tanya in her office, watching footage of the latest news cycle. New developments suggest activist Darius Jackson may have pressured key witnesses into testifying against Paul Whitaker. If true, this could call the entire case into question. Tanya scoffed. This is complete bullshit. Darius rubbed his temples. They don't need it to be true. They just need doubt. Tanya's fingers flew across her laptop. I'm running a trace on the sources behind this leak. Someone is feeding the media. Darius exhaled sharply. Yeah, and we need to know who. His gut told him one thing. This wasn't just revenge for Whitaker. This was part of a larger plan. And he was the next target. The name that changed everything. An hour later, Tanya looked up from her screen. Her face was pale. Her voice low. Darius, I found something. He leaned in. She turned the screen toward him. A name glowed on the monitor. A name that sent a chill down his spine. Senator William Hargrove. Darius sat back. You've got to be kidding me. Tanya shook her head. He's behind the media leaks. Funding the lawyers pushing for a retrial. Pulling strings inside the police department. Darius's hands clenched into fists. Senator William Hargrove. A powerful, wealthy politician with deep ties to law enforcement. A man who had built his career on backing the blue. And now he was coming for Darius. Tanya's voice was grim. This isn't just about Whitaker anymore. Darius exhaled. No, it's about protecting a system that should have died a long time ago. And Hargrove wasn't going to let one trial take it all down. The next move, Darius stood. I need to talk to Lena. Tanya frowned. You sure? He hesitated. No, but he had to. Because if Hargrove was involved, that meant Lena might have been pulled in deeper than she realized. And if there was any chance she was still keeping secrets, he had to know. Before it was too late, Darius drove in silence. The streets of Chicago blurred past him, but his mind was sharper than ever. Senator William Hargrove, a man who had turned police corruption into a political brand, a man who had spent years funding cops like Whitaker, protecting them, shielding them, arming them, and now he was coming for Darius. But before Darius made his next move, he needed to face one truth. Lena, the confrontation. Lena's apartment was in an upscale high-rise, far from the chaos that had engulfed Darius's life. He knocked once. No answer. Knocked again. The door opened. Lena stood there, eyes red-rimmed, hair tied back, an expression caught between relief and dread. Darius. We need to talk, he said. She nodded and stepped aside. The apartment was spotless, warm, a world away from everything he'd been fighting. And yet, it was here that one of the biggest betrayals had taken place. The secrets unravel. Lena sat on the couch. I know why you're here. Darius crossed his arms. Then let's skip the part where we pretend this is something else. She swallowed. It's Hargrove, isn't it? He nodded. How long? Lena looked down. Her hands trembled. Since the beginning. Darius inhaled sharply. So, when you told me you were helping, I was helping, she cut in, but I was also watching. His stomach twisted. For Hargrove. She nodded. Silence. Then she looked up, her eyes desperate. I didn't know how deep it went, Darius. At first, I thought I was just keeping tabs on a civil rights case for political interests, but then, Darius clenched his jaw. Then what? She exhaled, voice breaking. Then I started to see what they were really doing. She rubbed her arms like she was suddenly cold. I found files, conversations, things that made me sick. But by the time I realized what I was a part of, it was too late. If I backed out, Hargrove would have destroyed me. So I played along. But I swear to you, I never fed him anything that could hurt you. Not really. Darius studied her. Every part of him wanted to walk away, to leave her behind like she had left him. But another part, the part that had spent years fighting systems built to crush people, recognized something in her. Fear, regret, maybe even hope. You want to make this right? He asked. She nodded, eyes shining. More than anything. Darius sat down across from her. Then tell me everything. A dangerous game. For the next hour, Lena talked. She spilled names, connections, meeting places. Hargrove wasn't just defending cops like Whitaker. He was actively organizing them, funding private security groups, supplying ex-police with military-grade weapons, creating an entire network designed to keep men like him in power. No, this had to be fake. Had to be. His hands shook as he hit rewind. Played it again. It wasn't fake. The timestamp was months old, weeks before Whitaker had been arrested. Darius felt like the air had been punched from his lungs. Lena had met with Whitaker. Behind his back. The confrontation. He drove home in a daze. Lena was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup. Jalen was on the couch, watching cartoons. For a moment, everything looked normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Darius stepped inside. Lena, he said, his voice low, controlled. We need to talk. She turned, smiling. What's wrong? He pulled out his phone, held up the video, watched her face as it played. The smile faded. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted, but no words came. Lena, Darius said, his voice raw. What is this? She swallowed. I can explain. You knew him. You met with him. While I was fighting for my life, you were... It wasn't like that, she cut in, stepping forward. Darius, listen to me. Please. He held up a hand. Then talk, and make it good. Lena took a shaky breath. I didn't betray you, she said. I was protecting you. Darius let out a hollow laugh. Protecting me? By meeting with him? I didn't know who he really was, she pleaded. He reached out to me, said he wanted to make things right, said he could help. I believed him. Darius stared at her. You believed Whitaker? Lena nodded miserably. I thought if I could reason with him, get him to back off, maybe things wouldn't get so bad. But I was wrong. And when I realized who he really was, it was too late. Darius's jaw clenched. You should have told me, he said, his voice cold. I was scared, she cried. Darius, he threatened me. He told me if I told you, he'd make things worse. He'd go after Jalen. The mention of his son made his stomach twist. Lena wiped at her eyes. I didn't know what to do. Darius exhaled, running a hand over his face. He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. But the video burned in his mind. You should have told me, he repeated. Lena reached for his hand. I'm sorry, Darius. He didn't pull away, but he didn't squeeze back. Not yet. The setup. The next morning, Darius's name was all over the news. But not in the way he expected. Breaking, activist Darius Jackson, under investigation for alleged tampering in Whitaker case. Darius bolted upright. What the hell? The news anchor's voice was grave. Sources inside the Chicago PD have leaked evidence suggesting that Darius Jackson may have influenced key witnesses and manipulated evidence in the Paul Whitaker trial. While no formal charges have been filed, authorities are reportedly reviewing new information. Darius's skin went cold. This was a hit job, a counterstrike. Whoever Whitaker had been working for, whoever had sent that video wasn't done. Lena stood in the doorway, her face pale. Tanya called a second later. "Dee, you see this?" "I see it." "This is bad." Darius exhaled sharply. "I know. They're trying to discredit everything," Tanya said. "They're going after you now." Darius clenched his jaw. They were coming for him. For his credibility. For his freedom. Maybe even his life. And he had two choices. Run. Or fight. He met Lena's gaze. Saw the fear in her eyes. Saw the regret. But also the love. The loyalty. And, in that moment, he made his decision. On all counts. The courtroom erupted. Whitaker's face was a mask of shock. Darius felt Lena squeeze his hand. Jalen clung to his leg. It was over. Or so he thought. As Whitaker was escorted out, he turned to Darius, his lips curling into a sneer. "You think this is a victory?" he hissed. Darius met his glare. "No, this is just the beginning." Whitaker chuckled darkly. "You have no idea what's coming." Darius's stomach twisted, because deep down, he knew Whitaker wasn't bluffing. The trial had exposed the rot, but the system still stood, and some people would do anything to keep it that way. The city was still reeling from the verdict. Darius Jackson had won. Paul Whitaker was behind bars. The corrupt system had taken a hit, and yet Darius couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Maybe it was Whitaker's final words. Maybe it was the way certain politicians refused to comment on the case. Maybe it was just survival instinct, but something told him the storm wasn't done. He just didn't realize how close it was. The leak. 3 days after the trial, Darius sat in his office flipping through emails. Outside, the city pulsed with new energy, activists celebrating, people finally believing justice was possible. And then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Darius frowned, hesitated, then answered. "You thought this was over?" The voice was low, distorted. Darius stiffened. "Who is this?" "You think Whitaker was the only one?" The caller let out a dark chuckle. "You're about to find out just how deep this goes." The line went dead. Darius's pulse pounded. A second later, his email refreshed. A single new message. No subject. No text. Just an attachment. Darius hesitated, then clicked. The file loaded. Security footage. Grainy black and white. An office. A desk. A man sitting behind it, his face half-shadowed. And then, Darius's breath caught. A second figure entered the frame. Familiar. Too familiar. Lena. His Lena. Talking. Shaking hands. With Paul Whitaker. Darius pushed back from his desk, his stomach twisting. No. The body cam footage, mysteriously damaged but still damning. The kidnapping tape. Every piece of evidence built a fortress around Whitaker's guilt. But Darius knew better than to celebrate early. Because then came the defense. The defense's strategy attacked Darius. Whitaker's attorney, Nathan Voss, was a shark in a tailored suit. He didn't waste time trying to argue his client's innocence. Instead, he did what corrupt men always did. He blamed Darius. "My client," Voss said smoothly, "was caught in a media firestorm fueled by Mr. Jackson's vendetta. The prosecution wants you to believe Officer Whitaker is a monster, but I ask you, who really had something to gain from this?" Darius's jaw tightened. "You see," Voss continued, "Paul Whitaker was an officer investigating possible criminal activity. And Mr. Jackson? Well, let's just say his past isn't as clean as he'd have you believe." Darius's blood ran cold. He knew what was coming next. The smear campaign. Voss pulled out a thick folder and laid it on the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let's talk about Darius Jackson." The courtroom screen flickered to life. Darius's face, an old mugshot. A noise rippled through the room. The jury stiffened. Darius closed his eyes. He knew the picture well. 17 years old. A kid caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Arrested for loitering, resisting arrest, and assaulting an officer. A charge that had been nothing more than a desperate attempt to shield himself from police fists. The charges had been dropped, the arrest expunged, but it didn't matter. The image was enough. Voss turned to the jury. A man with a history of conflict with law enforcement. A man who has made it his mission to destroy police careers. A man who... Objection. Greer thundered. This is character assassination. Voss shrugged. I'm simply establishing motive, Your Honor. The judge frowned. Sustain the objection. Move on, Mr. Voss. But the damage was done. Darius could feel it. The seed had been planted. The power play. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy exploded. Fox News ran segments calling Darius a troublemaker with an anti-police agenda. Far-right influencers spun conspiracy theories. Politicians, desperate to avoid angering law enforcement, stayed silent. Darius felt the weight pressing down on him. This is what they do, Tanya said bitterly as they watched the coverage. They can't argue the facts, so they muddy the waters. Lena was livid. And people are buying it? Tanya shook her head. Not everyone, but enough. Darius sighed. We have to hit back. Harder. The next morning, he walked into the courtroom with his head high. If Whitaker's people wanted to play dirty, so would he. The bombshell testimony. Malik Greer wasn't done. He had one final witness. Someone no one saw coming. As the doors opened, a hush fell over the courtroom. A man in a crisp black suit stepped inside. Silver badge on his belt. FBI Special Agent Raymond Carter. Whitaker's smirk vanished. Greer turned to the jury. The prosecution calls Agent Carter to the stand. Whitaker's attorney stood abruptly. Your Honor, we were not made aware of this witness. Overruled. Carter took the stand, cleared his throat, and looked Whitaker dead in the eye. My name is Special Agent Raymond Carter. I've spent the last 2 years investigating systemic corruption within the Chicago Police Department. The room went still, and Paul Whitaker was a key player in that corruption. Darius's breath caught. He planted evidence. He falsified reports. He covered up misconduct, including assaults, illegal arrests, and even homicides committed by fellow officers. Whitaker was rigid, his jaw clenched. But the worst? Carter's expression darkened. He had allies, people in high places protecting him. Darius could see the jury shifting. This was it. The moment everything changed. Carter leaned forward. And I have proof. The verdict. 2 days later, the jury delivered their decision. Guilty. Tanya placed a hand on his shoulder. Not if we get Jalen back first. The chase begins. The cops were useless. Predictably, the responding officer, a young guy named Andrews, looked uncomfortable even being there. Look, I understand your concerns, Mr. Jackson, but without proof that... Proof. Darius exploded. That was him on the goddamn tape. Andrews shifted. It's unclear. And Whitaker's still technically. I don't care. Darius roared. That's my son. Andrews sighed. We'll put out an alert. It was nothing. A delay. A slow, plotting process that Whitaker was counting on. Darius had no intention of waiting. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Meet me at 505 West Roosevelt. Come alone. You want her son? Don't be stupid. Darius's blood ran cold. Tanya grabbed his arm. You are not going alone. He stared at her, his mind warring between rage and fear. I don't have a choice. You do, she insisted. We can outplay him, Darius. Let's be smart about this. His breathing was ragged. He knew she was right, but this wasn't just strategy anymore. This was his son. The warehouse showdown. The location was an abandoned warehouse. Of course it was. Darius stepped inside, his fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. And then he saw him, Jalen, tied to a chair, his eyes wide, filled with terror. And beside him, Whitaker, grinning. You really are predictable, Jackson, he sneered. You always think you're in control. Darius barely restrained himself from lunging. Let him go. Whitaker sighed dramatically. You just don't get it, do you? You messed with something bigger than you understand. And now I have to clean it up. Darius's muscles coiled. You mean kill me? Whitaker chuckled. Oh no, that'd be too easy. I want you broken. I want you ruined. You're gonna take the fall for this, Jackson. See, the world's gonna think you kidnapped your own kid. That you're some unstable, dangerous man. And then, well, accidents happen in police custody. Darius's breath was coming fast now. You're insane. Whitaker smirked. No, I'm realistic. I know how the world works. You? You actually thought you could win? Darius glanced at Jalen. His son was breathing hard, his little hands gripping the chair. But his eyes were locked on his father, trusting him, believing in him. Darius's resolve hardened like steel. One problem, Whitaker. His voice was quiet, lethal. Whitaker raised an eyebrow. Oh, you should have checked my phone. Whitaker frowned. Then BAM, the warehouse doors exploded inward. Tanya, a SWAT team, FBI agents, guns trained on Whitaker. The corrupt cop barely had time to register what was happening before agents swarmed him, forcing him to the ground. Paul, Whitaker, an officer barked, "You're under arrest for the kidnapping of Jalen Jackson, conspiracy, and multiple counts of misconduct. You have the right to remain silent." Darius was already at Jalen's side, tearing through the ropes, pulling him into his arms. "Daddy?" Jalen sobbed. "I got you, buddy," Darius choked. "I got you." As Whitaker was dragged away, he thrashed, his face twisted in rage. "This isn't over, Jackson. You think this changes anything? You'll never win." Darius met his glare, steady, calm. "I already did." Whitaker's screams faded as they threw him into the police van. Jalen clung to Darius's neck, his tiny fingers gripping him like a lifeline. Tanya stood beside them, breathing hard, her face unreadable. It's done. But deep down, Darius knew better. The man might be behind bars, but the system that protected him? That fight was just beginning. Darius stood outside the courthouse, staring at the sea of reporters, activists, and onlookers gathered in the bitter Chicago cold. This wasn't just another trial. This was a reckoning. Paul Whitaker, once a decorated officer, once untouchable, was about to stand trial for kidnapping, conspiracy, and a string of corruption charges. But Darius knew better than anyone that justice was never guaranteed. Not for men like him. Tanya stood beside him, arms crossed, scanning the crowd. "You ready for this?" Darius exhaled. "I have to be." Lena arrived a moment later, holding Jalen's hand. His son looked up at him, the bruises on his wrists a fading reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. Darius crouched down. "You okay, buddy?" Jalen nodded. "Are we safe now?" Darius swallowed hard. "We will be." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. The system wasn't built to punish its own. And Paul Whitaker still had powerful friends. The prosecution's case. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Malik Greer, wasted no time painting a damning picture of Whitaker's crimes. The defendant, Greer declared, pacing before the jury, abused his badge to terrorize an innocent man. He falsified evidence, used excessive force, and when that wasn't enough, he kidnapped a child. This wasn't a moment of bad judgment. This was calculated, deliberate, and it cannot go unpunished. The jury, a mix of black, white, and Latino citizens, listened intently. Some nodded. Others remained unreadable. Darius sat stiffly, his hands clenched in his lap. Every day of the trial, he relived the worst moments of his life. Surveillance footage from the airport stop. A hand grabbed Darius's shoulder, yanking him back. He spun, fists clenched, then froze. Paul Whitaker, dressed in riot gear, face twisted with a smirk. "Not so brave now, are you, boy?" Rage boiled in Darius's chest. "You're done, Whitaker. Everyone's watching." Whitaker leaned in, voice low. "Not for long. You think you can win this? You think the system works for you?" He chuckled darkly. "You have no idea how deep this goes." Then, before Darius could react, Whitaker was gone, disappearing into the chaos as quickly as he had come. Darius's pulse pounded. This wasn't just about justice anymore. This was war. And Whitaker had just made his next move, the kidnapping that changed everything. Hours later, as Darius and Tanya regrouped at a safe house, Lena called. Her voice was shaking. Darius, Jalen is missing. His world stopped. What? His breath hitched. What do you mean missing? I was supposed to pick him up from school, she sobbed. But he wasn't there. His teacher said a man came to get him, said it was his father. Darius, I swear I never. Darius's mind spun, the pieces clicking together in an instant. Whitaker. He staggered back, the walls closing in. His son. His little boy. Gone. And then another text flashed on his phone. Darius's hands shook as he stared at the text. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might crack his ribs. Jalen was missing. A chill ran through his entire body. He clutched his phone, his knuckles white. Tanya's voice cut through the haze. Darius, listen to me. We will find him. He could barely process the words. Jalen, his little boy, was gone. Snatched by a man who had already proven he had no limits. Darius had been ready to fight this battle in the courts, in the media, in the streets. But now it was personal. The first clue. His fingers fumbled dialing Lena's number. She picked up instantly, her sobs barely contained. They said you picked him up, Darius, she cried. His teacher, she said, a man showed up, said he was his father, and Jalen went with him. But it wasn't you. I don't. Lena. His voice was sharper than he meant. Did the school have cameras? Why, yes. The principal said. Tell them to pull the footage now. I'm on my way. Tanya was already moving. I'll drive. They tore through the streets of Chicago, every second stretching into an eternity. Darius's mind replayed every possibility, every terrible scenario. When they arrived at Jalen's school, the principal, a short, frazzled woman named Ms. Carter, met them at the door. We already called the police, she said, wringing her hands. Darius barely heard her. Show me the footage. Inside the security office, the grainy video flickered to life. The timestamp read 3:17 p.m. Jalen stood outside, his backpack slung over one shoulder, waiting like he always did. Then a man approached, tall, broad shoulders, dressed in dark clothes, a baseball cap tilted low. Darius's fists clenched. Even through the poor quality, he knew that walk. Paul Whitaker. The bastard knelt in front of Jalen, speaking softly. Jalen hesitated, then slowly took his hand. Darius felt the bile rise in his throat. The video ended. I'm going to kill him, Darius whispered. A chill ran through him. He stared at the message for a long time before responding. Darius, come find me. And just like that, the war escalated. Darius stared at his phone, the glow of the screen burning into his eyes. The threat was clear. Someone with power wanted him to back off. But backing off had never been an option. The next morning, he met Tanya at a secure location, a small office in Hyde Park, far from the chaos surrounding her firebomb practice. The city was still reeling from the attack, but the police had yet to make any arrests. Of course they hadn't. The same system that had protected Paul Whitaker wasn't about to rush to help Darius Jackson or Tanya Brooks. Tanya wasted no time. We need to go on offense. Hard. If they're willing to attack my office, it means we're closer to something big. Darius nodded, his jaw tight. Then we push harder. The secret files. Tanya's source inside CPD, an officer she only referred to as R, had come through with something explosive. They've been covering up Whitaker's misconduct for years, she said, pulling up a set of redacted documents on her tablet. He's been accused of excessive force at least 9 times. Every complaint disappeared. Settlements paid out under the table. But here's the kicker. 2 of those complainants vanished. Darius leaned forward. Vanished how? One turned up dead in an accidental car crash. The other was last seen being shoved into an unmarked car. That was 4 years ago. No body, no case. Darius's stomach churned. This wasn't just about one racist cop. This was a system that protected him, covered up his crimes, and buried the people who spoke out. Tanya's voice was grim. We're dealing with something deeper than we thought. Darius exhaled. Then we take it apart piece by piece. The rally that shook Chicago. That night, they called for a mass demonstration outside the courthouse. Thousands flooded the streets. Signs held high. Chants of justice for Darius echoed across the city. But the real moment came when Darius stepped onto the makeshift stage. He gripped the microphone, scanning the crowd. Cameras pointed at him, recording every word. I was stopped at O'Hare because of the color of my skin, he began. Paul Whitaker thought he could intimidate me, silence me, and destroy my life. But let me make something clear, he picked the wrong one. The crowd roared. They tried to smear me. They tried to set my lawyer's office on fire. They think fear will keep us quiet. But we are not afraid. Not today. Not ever again. A surge of cheers swept through the protesters. Tanya stepped beside him. They tell us to be patient, she said into the mic, to wait for justice. But how long have we waited? How many names have we chanted, only to see their killers walk free? No more waiting. We demand action now. The energy was electric. But across the street, Darius spotted something, a cluster of unmarked police SUVs. A bad feeling settled in his gut. And then the first flashbang went off. Chaos and betrayal. The explosion of sound sent the crowd into a frenzy. People screamed, scattering as riot police stormed in. Batons swung. Tear gas canisters hissed. Darius grabbed Tanya's wrist. We have to move. They pushed through the chaos, the air thick with smoke and fear. A protester collapsed beside them, blood pouring from a head wound. Police were snatching people up, slamming them to the pavement. This wasn't crowd control. This was punishment. The counterattack begins. Later that morning, an emergency press conference was called by CPD officials. Darius, Tanya, and a small team of activists watched from Tanya's law office, tension thick in the air. Standing stiffly at the podium was Commissioner Raymond Harlow, a man notorious for his unwavering defense of the department. His gaze was cold, his voice measured. We take these allegations seriously. However, the department will not be rushed into judgment by social media hysteria. Officer Whitaker has served the city with honor, and we ask the public to allow a full and fair review of the incident before drawing conclusions. Darius scoffed. A full and fair review? That's code for we're waiting for this to die down. Tanya's eyes were fixed on the screen. They're buying time. They know they're cornered, but they're hoping the public moves on. A reporter in the crowd fired back. Commissioner Harlow, what do you say to those calling for Officer Whitaker's immediate suspension? Harlow straightened. We do not make personnel decisions based on public pressure. We follow due process. The room erupted into a cacophony of shouting reporters, but Darius had already heard enough. We're going to make sure they can't ignore this, Tanya said, turning to him. An hour later, she took to the podium in front of the courthouse. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tanya Brooks, and I represent Mr. Darius Jackson. We have heard the Chicago Police Department statement, and we find it lacking. What we witnessed in that video was not a misunderstanding. It was a crime. Racial profiling is not due process. Planting evidence is not due process. Beating an unarmed man is not due process. We demand accountability. We demand action. And we will not be silenced. The crowd roared. The smear campaign. Within days, the backlash began. Right-wing commentators latched onto an old misdemeanor from Darius's college years. A minor charge for a scuffle outside a bar. Suddenly, headlines screamed about his criminal past, twisting a drunken argument into something sinister. He's no victim, a television pundit sneered. He's just another thug playing the race card. The narrative was shifting. Darius felt the sting of it, the anger, the helplessness. They're trying to make this about me, he said bitterly one night, slumped on Tanya's office couch. They always do, she replied. They don't want people talking about what Whitaker did. They want them talking about you. Distract, deflect, discredit. It's a playbook as old as time. Darius's phone buzzed with another flood of messages, some supportive, others filled with venom. "You're a fraud. Bet you staged the whole thing for attention. You deserved it." Lena, his ex-girlfriend and the mother of his son, called that evening. "You okay?" she asked. Darius hesitated. "I don't know." "I saw the news," she said. "They're coming for you hard. I can handle it." She paused. "Just be careful, D. You've got people who need you. Jalen needs you." His heart clenched. His son, his entire world, was at the center of all this. And suddenly, he realized just how far his enemies might go. The threat escalates. Days later, the first true act of retaliation struck. A Molotov cocktail shattered the front window of Tanya's office at 3 a.m. The fire was small, controlled before it could spread, but the message was clear. "This is a warning," the arson investigator said grimly. "Someone wants you to stop." Tanya was undeterred. "We keep going." But Darius felt the shift. This wasn't just about smearing his name anymore. This was about silencing him, permanently if necessary. Late that night, as he sat in his dimly lit apartment, a text flashed across his phone screen. "Unknown number. Back off while you still can." As Darius prepared to step back into the public, the narrative began to shift. News anchors, once dismissive of his claims, now spoke with a gravity that underscored the unfolding crisis. Images of his ordeal, now juxtaposed with scenes of impassioned protests, painted a damning portrait of a system on the brink of collapse. The incident at O'Hare had become a symbol, a rallying cry for those who had long been silenced by injustice. Yet, even as hope flickered in the hearts of many, there remained a dark undercurrent. Within the corridors of power, certain figures recognized that the tide was turning against them. Deep inside a secure facility, Officer Whitaker's superiors and their shadowy allies began to scheme. Their objective was clear: to discredit Darius and neutralize the movement before it could inflict irreparable damage on their reputations. Whispers of retribution filled the halls of power. Memos circulated that hinted at desperate measures. A campaign of character assassination, the planting of further evidence to frame Darius, and even the orchestration of violent acts designed to instill fear and discredit the protest movement. One such memo, discovered by an intrepid journalist, referenced Operation Iron Curtain, a clandestine plan to suppress the rising tide of dissent by any means necessary. For Darius, these revelations were a chilling reminder that the battle was far from over. The public might have been awakened, but the forces of corruption were determined to remain entrenched. Every news report, every rally, every heartfelt testimonial was met by countermeasures designed to muddy the waters. And as federal investigators began to peel back the layers of the case, it became clear that Darius's fight was not just for his own freedom, it was for the soul of an entire nation. In the midst of the unfolding drama, Tanya worked tirelessly to compile the evidence needed to force a retrial. Late nights at the courthouse, clandestine meetings in dimly lit cafes, and heated phone calls with whistleblowers became her new reality. She was driven by a fierce belief in justice, even as the stakes grew ever higher. "We cannot allow fear to silence truth," she would say, her voice resolute as she gathered each piece of damning evidence against the corrupt officials. Public sentiment was reaching a fever pitch. Protesters took to the streets with banners demanding accountability and justice for all victims of systemic abuse. Demonstrations at police precincts, town hall meetings in local communities, and viral campaigns online underscored a collective cry for change. For many, Darius had become the embodiment of resistance, a man who, despite being wronged, refused to bow down to a rigged system. By the end of this tumultuous period, the pressure on the authorities had become nearly unbearable. The national conversation had shifted from isolated incidents to a broader reckoning with institutional racism. Federal agencies began to mobilize, and the possibility of sweeping reforms loomed on the horizon. But the battle was not without its sacrifices. Lives were disrupted, relationships strained, and the scars of injustice ran deep. As night fell once more over Chicago, Darius sat in solitude, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The initial shock of that fateful day at the airport had given way to a profound understanding of the complexities of power, prejudice, and resistance. In the quiet moments between the chaos, he found solace in the thought that every act of defiance, every cry for justice, was a step toward a better future, a future where the truth, no matter how painful, would always find a way to shine through the darkness. As dawn broke over Chicago, the city's pulse quickened. Streets, once calm now, rumbled with the echo of protest chants, and news vans lined the roads outside the police precinct. Darius Jackson, the man at the heart of the storm, felt the weight of it all as he watched from his apartment window. Below, people gathered, holding signs that bore his name, his face, and his fight. He hadn't asked for this battle, but he refused to back down. The night before, Tanya had called with urgent news. "They're pushing back hard, Darius. I just got word from a source inside the department. Whitaker's people are trying to bury the footage." Darius clenched his jaw. "Of course they are." "That's not all," Tanya continued. "They're launching a smear campaign. They want to dig up anything on you, old records, past mistakes, anything they can twist." Darius exhaled sharply. It was the oldest play in the book. When the system was caught in the wrong, it flipped the script, turning the victim into the villain. "We fight back," he said simply. Tanya sighed on the other end of the line. "It won't be easy, but we have the truth on our side." Truth. The word lingered in the air as he turned back to the laptop on his kitchen table. The viral video had taken on a life of its own. It had been dissected by legal analysts, featured in opinion pieces, and debated on primetime television. The pressure on the Chicago Police Department was mounting, and Whitaker, once just another faceless cop with unchecked power, was now the face of an unraveling scandal. Still, Darius knew better than to celebrate too soon. As the segment closes, Darius reflects on the irony of his situation. Once just an ordinary man going about his day, he had been thrust into a public battle against prejudice and brutality. The encounter at the airport had set in motion events that would challenge the very foundations of authority. And though he was wounded, both physically and emotionally, Darius was determined to rise, to reclaim his dignity, and to ensure that the world would never again ignore the cries for justice. Darius Jackson's world had turned upside down in the hours after the airport incident. What had begun as a harrowing moment of injustice had exploded across the digital landscape, igniting a firestorm of public outrage. Overnight, the viral video of his mistreatment spread like wildfire. Every tweet, post, and share etched the image of his defiant, yet wounded face into the hearts of thousands, and soon millions, demanding accountability. In his modest apartment overlooking a restless Chicago street, Darius sat before a battered laptop. The screen was awash with angry hashtags, impassioned tweets, and live news feeds. Hashtag Justice for Darius scrolled incessantly across social media platforms, intermingling with images of flashing police lights and tearful testimonies. His chest tightened as he read the messages of solidarity from people across the country, calls to end systemic abuse and bring the perpetrators to justice. Yet amid the support, bitter voices and even threats surfaced. At the center of the storm was Officer Paul Whitaker, a man who until that moment had seemed like an unremarkable cog in the system. Now, his face had become a symbol of unchecked power and racial prejudice. In every angry post, every protest sign held up in defiance, his image was a target. For Darius, it was personal. The injustice he endured was more than a single incident. It was the culmination of years spent fighting for respect in a society skewed by bias. Across town, in a sleek glass-paneled office in downtown Atlanta, Tanya Brooks, Darius's steadfast attorney, was preparing for the legal battle ahead. The phone on her desk rang incessantly as she coordinated with civil rights organizations, local activists, and high-profile media outlets. Determined to transform Darius's painful ordeal into a catalyst for change, Tanya organized a press conference that would soon capture the nation's attention. Her office, cluttered with case files, printed statements, and flickering monitors streaming live coverage, buzzed with urgency. "We must ensure that Every piece of evidence, every frame, every word is preserved, she insisted her team. This isn't just about one man's dignity, it's about exposing the rot at the heart of our system. In between calls, she pored over the documents that detailed the blatant abuse of power, cross-referencing witness testimonies with surveillance footage. Each moment reaffirmed her belief that Darius was not just a victim. He was the spark for a long-awaited reckoning. Outside, the atmosphere in the city was electric. In neighborhoods where hope had long been a scarce commodity, community centers filled with people eager to hear updates. Local activist groups, some well-established, others emerging from the digital undercurrent, held meetings sharing strategies to leverage the growing public sentiment. Banners were painted with bold messages like "Stop Racism Now" and "No Justice, No Peace," and spontaneous rallies erupted on street corners as citizens marched toward police precincts demanding accountability. Among these activists was a spirited young woman named Tasha, whose impassioned speeches at community forums galvanized a generation of voters. "This is our moment," she proclaimed to a packed hall in a modest community center. "We cannot stand idle while our brothers and sisters are trampled by the very authorities meant to protect us. It's time to reclaim our dignity and our power." Her words, broadcast live via social media, resonated far beyond the confines of that room. In a cramped diner on the outskirts of Atlanta, a similar fervor was building. Groups of people huddled over coffee, eyes fixed on their phones as updates about Darius's case and the unfolding protest movement filled the screen. Among them sat Marcus Holloway, a name that in recent days had become synonymous with resilience against oppression. Marcus, who had himself weathered numerous brushes with injustice, watched the video of Darius with a solemn intensity. "This fight isn't new," he murmured to a fellow diner, "but it's a spark that might just light the flame of real change." His words carried the weight of experience and hope. As the day progressed, the pressure on local authorities mounted. A prominent Georgia senator, alarmed by the torrent of evidence and public demand, tweeted a terse message. "Looking into this, DOJ might too." The tweet, simple yet potent, reverberated across news cycles, fueling an already growing clamor for federal intervention. It wasn't long before major national news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a glaring example of the systemic abuse rampant within law enforcement. Meanwhile, Darius found himself at a crossroads. With his reputation under assault and his every step scrutinized, he began to contemplate a response beyond the courtroom. He realized that the only way to counter the false narrative spun by Officer Whitaker and his cohorts was to turn public sentiment into a tangible force, a force that could demand reform and dismantle the oppressive structures from within. Late that evening, as rain began to patter against his window, Darius sat at his kitchen table, his eyes scanning through countless messages of support and personal stories shared by strangers. In one particularly poignant message, a middle-aged man recounted his own experiences of being harassed and degraded by those sworn to protect. The man's raw emotion resonated with Darius, sparking a resolve to transform his personal pain into collective action. In an impromptu meeting with local community leaders, Darius and Tanya outlined a plan to rally support for a series of peaceful protests and legal challenges. They knew that the battle ahead was not just against a single racist officer, it was against a system steeped in prejudice and corruption. The plan was ambitious: stage a series of coordinated demonstrations at key public institutions, demand accountability through citizen-led inquiries, and ultimately force a retrial that would clear Darius's name and expose the deep-seated rot within the police force. Over the following days, the momentum only grew. Volunteer groups, social media influencers, and grassroots organizations united under the banner of justice. Fundraisers were organized, and the donations began to roll in, small amounts at first, but soon scaling up to thousands of dollars. Every contribution was a reaffirmation of the public's desire for change, a message that Darius's struggle was not his alone.